Hi there. In this video I'm going to show you how to create an asbestos survey report from start to finish using our software Flow Mobile Surveying. First of all, I'll explain there are two parts to the software. There's the dashboard, which you can see here on the left hand side, and this is designed to work in the office. And then there's the mobile app, which you can see here on the right hand side. And the two things work in real time with one another. So any changes you make in the office will be instantly reflected on site, and vice versa. Any changes you make on the app will be instantly visible in the office. Now, a common question we get asked at this point in the demo is, will the app work offline? And the answer is yes. The app is designed to work offline. You shouldn't notice any difference between working online and working offline. Everything should just work the way you expect it to. Now, before you go to site to carry out your on-site survey, you'll want to schedule up a job. The normal process is to schedule a job in the office using the dashboard, like I'm about to show you here, but you also have the option to create what's called a draft job. As you can see here, if you're on the move, this can be a good option too. So let's get started and create our first job. Now, the first thing to do is to tap the Create Job button, and you're presented with this form. So let's fill in some details about my job. I'm going to say my client is Joe Bloggs. Next, let's put in the project reference. This is your internal job ID. Next, we'll put in the address. So I've got mine saved in the clipboard here. And you can see it will find this on the map. So it's geocoded this and used its best guess to try and figure out where this job is. You can also zoom in and actually pinpoint this location if you want to. We can skip UPRN, it's a unique property reference number, mostly gets used by councils and the like. Pipeline is the type of work that you're doing. So in this case, I'm doing an asbestos survey. I'm going to select that from the drop down, and you'd only have access to the pipelines we give you. We'll come back to these at the end of the demo. Now, tags are a way you can additionally categorize the job. So a common one could be something like urgent. You can create tags yourself. We don't choose these for you. It's something your admin team must do. Next is the value. So the value is how much the job is actually worth to you. So I'm going to say this job is worth £500. It's worth noting that the value is only visible to dashboard users, not mobile users. Next, you have the option to put in some private notes. I say private because the client doesn't get to see these. So you could say something like keys in lockbox, code 1234. People also like to put telephone numbers in here too, because it's easy to copy them on the mobile app and then paste into your phone. The simplest way to schedule a job is just to put in the date, like I'm going to do here. And you can also put in the start time and the end date and time as well if you wish. That's optional. Next, you must assign it to the users who are doing the work. So I'll assign it to myself, and I'll assign this to Amber as well. If you haven't assigned a job to a user, you won't see it on your mobile app. So because I've assigned this job to myself, because I'm logged in as myself, this is going to pop up on the right hand side in a second due to that real-time data sync I was talking about earlier. Next is we must put the due date. This is when you expect to get the report to your client. So I'm going to say tomorrow if you've got next day lab turnaround. Now keep an eye on the mobile app on the right hand side. As soon as I click save, this is going to sync up to the mobile app automatically. So at this point, you've got one of two options. You can either start to create the report in the office using the dashboard, or you can create it on the mobile app. It's up to you. I would always suggest creating the report in the office using the dashboard, because you can pre-fill some information, and it means when you get to site or when your surveyors get to site, they know what they're doing or you know what you're doing. So let's go ahead and create the report by pressing the Add Report button here. Now you can see I've got a long list of reports here. You would only have the ones we give you access to. The one I'm interested in here is the Asbestos Survey V4 template. I've chosen a template here which uses some additional features. We call them quick fills because it's something I'd like to show you. We're also using the UK version of this template, which is based on the HSG 264 standard. If you're in another country, for example New Zealand or Australia, we have separate templates based on those standards. For example, the WorkSafe and Safe Work standards. So the first thing you're going to want to do before you go to site is to put in some information about the job itself, for example, the scope of work. To do that, go into this section here and fill out these fields. So in my case, the scope of work is going to be a management survey with a refurb to the kitchen. I'm not going to fill the rest of this information in. If you don't fill this in, the report won't look incomplete in any way. It'll just omit these fields from the report. I'm going to click Save now, and you can see that section is checked off. We've got this little tick mark. That's letting us know we've done that section, and we can move on to the next one. Additional things you might want to do in the office before you go to site are to upload any attachments if you've got any site plans you're working from, for example. I'm not going to do that now. Once you've finished that, you've essentially done your desktop study. Now you or your surveying team can start work on the mobile app and start collecting some survey data on site. So the first thing you may want to do on site is to view the job notes. This is that little private message that we added to the job when we were in the office. So like I said, this is a great place to put information about the client, telephone number, and so on. Next is we can drill into the job itself. And you may want to get directions by pressing this button. This will open up Google Maps if you're on an Android device, or Apple Maps if you're on an iOS device. You can also copy the address like so, and then paste it into a third-party navigation app, for example, Waze. Now, because we've assigned this job to the Asbestos Surveys pipeline, it's saying there are 5 stages we need to go through: site work, lab results, floor plans, QC, and issued. You can mark off each one of these stages as you go to update the status of the job and let anyone in the office know where you're up to. So when you're on site, you may want to mark the site work as work in progress. That's this orange status. If there's a problem getting in the building for some reason, it would be this snag status. And then once the stage is complete, it's this green tick. So I'm going to mark this as work in progress, just to let anyone in the office know that we've started the job. And again, you can see that real-time data sync works both ways. We've now got this site work showing us work in progress on the dashboard too. Now I'm going to drill into this report and take a quick peek at the scope of work so we know what we're doing. You can see here I'm able to view that information we added in the dashboard, and I know that we're doing a management survey with a refurb to kitchen. Also, because I assigned this job the urgent tag, you can see that's appearing front and center. So tags are a great way to convey information to your surveying team. Now let's take a photo of the building. This is going to form our cover page photo. Normally you'd use this option here to open up the native camera on your phone or your tablet. I'm going to use this option because I'm using a simulator to select an image from my gallery. Here's an image of a terraced house, and for clarity I'm going to say house with the yellow door and click save. Now the cover page section is complete, and we can start with the inspection itself. This is where you're going to spend most of your time on site using the app. So let's go ahead and add a few items as we go through our survey. For the first item, I'm going to say we're in the main building, level -1 because we're in the basement, and the location, I'm going to say 001 for my location numbering. By the way, this is good practice in the industry. It's always good to number your locations. And I'm going to say basement for the name of that location. Now you've got the option to inspect a location or an item. You would use inspect location if you want to do room notes, and inspect item if you found an item of interest, which is what I've done. So I'm going to say the item is flooring. The material is bitumen. And you can see as I'm clicking these little options, this is giving me some prompts, but I'm not limited to these. You know, there's no reason why I can't say something like bituminous material. I can just free text this too. Next is the photographs. I'm going to take 2 photos, one for context from a little bit further out. There's my bitumen flooring, and another close-up. Next, we can see if it's limited access. I've got no access issues here, so I'll just ignore that. And we do suspect asbestos. The strategy will be to take a sample, and the sample ID is whatever you're putting on your sample bag. So I'm going to say 001. For the sample type, I'm going to put in broken edge. This is part of the HSG 248 regulations, and then we can score this up. You'll notice underneath that these little hints are taken directly from the HSG 264, and they just remind you what these different scoring criteria mean. We have an additional feature called quick fills, which I'll show you shortly, which speeds up this process even further. So I'm going to score this up, and for the extent, I'm going to say 10 meters squared. The recommendation, I'm just going to say manage. There's no reason why you can't do things like the recommendations in the office later. You don't necessarily have to do them here and now on site, but I will just put a recommendation in this time. Now I'm going to click save, and that's my first item added. Now let's imagine we've gone from the basement to the ground floor and we've seen an identical looking bitumen flooring. We wouldn't want to have to re-enter that same information from scratch, bearing in mind we've already seen this in the basement. What we can actually do is we can make a copy to save ourselves some time. So the way you do that is you swipe to the right to make the copy. The system then prompts you, what do you want to copy? I'm going to say it's everything, but it's a different level, a different location, and it's going to be a different strategy too, because we're not taking a new physical sample. This is going to be a cross-reference this time. So I'll untick that one as well. Now when I press continue, it's going to pull through that information that we've cherry-picked from the first item to save ourselves from having to enter it again. Now it's just a case of filling in the remaining fields. So for the level, I'm going to say we're on the ground floor this time, which is level 0. The location is going to be 002 this time. And you can see it's remembered that previous 001 basement. It's telling us we've used that one time. Therefore, we know the next in the sequence is going to be 002. So I'm going to call this the hallway. For the photos, I'm going to take some fresh photos. When you do the copy, it doesn't copy photos by default because we know you're going to want to take some new ones. So there's our context photo, and here's our close-up. This time the strategy is going to be a cross-reference to that original sample. Now I did say I was going to show you a way to speed up the data collection. This is probably a good point to show you how that would be done. Let's imagine that we hadn't put any of this scoring information in. Let's imagine also that we hadn't yet put the material in. You may have noticed this little lightning bolt icon in the top right hand corner. We call this quick fills. If I want to quick fill this form in a particular way, I have these little shortcuts that I can use. So for example, if I select bituminous product, it pre-fills the material, the product type and the surface treatment based on the common recommendations from the HSG 264. If I was to change the quick fill at this point, for example, if I select this one instead, that's going to overwrite the material, the product type and the surface treatment based on that material's recommended values from the HSG 264. What we can't infer is the extent of damage because that's going to change from one item to the next. So you have to put that in yourself. So we call that quick fills. Now, even though I've used a quick fill, I can just score this up however I want. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to save this item, and there you go. There's our second item added, and it was a lot quicker because we used the copy item feature to save ourselves rekeying the same information. Now let's imagine I'm still in the hallway and I've seen something else I'm interested in. I don't want to necessarily have to enter the building, level and location again, so I can use a different shortcut here. What I'll do is I'll press this little group icon and say add item here. What that does is it pre-fills that location information for me, so I don't have to add it again. I'm going to say item because we found an item of interest, and this time it's going to be some electrics. The material, I'm going to say biscuit board, and by the way, you can see again, it's remembered that previous bituminous material, even though it wasn't in this original list, so it will remember the previous values within the scope of the survey. Like I say, I'm going to pop biscuit board in there. I'm going to put a couple of new photos in. There's our context photo. Here's our close-up. And this time it is limited access. We don't want to get too near these electrics. So I'm going to say limited access. The reason being that we have a live service supply. But we do suspect asbestos. The strategy will be to do a strong presume because we're not taking a physical sample this time. And then I'm going to presume the fibre type is chrysotile based on our experience as a surveyor, and then we'll score this up. Again, I'm just using random scoring here. The extent this time is just going to be 1, and the recommendation, I'm going to say mark and manage for this one, and click save. So because we used that add item here shortcut, that was relatively quick again to create that new item. Now, one thing we haven't done is to create some room notes the way you do this is, again, we'll use the Add Item Here shortcut, but this time we're going to select location. You can think of location as room notes in most cases. For the location notes, you might want to say something like this. Just describe the room as a whole. If you hadn't found any asbestos, that might be a good place to put it. So you could say something like this. In our case, we have suspected a couple of items, so I'm not going to do that. Most people just take a single photo for a location. So I'm going to select this image of a hallway from my gallery and we'll click Save. So there we go. We've added 2 items in our hallway along with some room notes to show your client that you've been into that room and considered it properly. Room notes are a great way to show your client that you've been into a location and you've considered it, even if you haven't necessarily found anything. So we've added a few different inspection items there and also some room notes for the hallway. You would just continue on in the same way, collecting data in that same way until you finish the survey. Now, the only other thing you might want to do on site is to draw a sketch of your floor plan, and this is just a reminder that you have to draw this up later when you're back in the office. Alternatively, you might be using an on-site app for floor plans, in which case you could use that instead. But if you are doing the sketch then draw later approach, it is a good idea to upload the sketch to the attachments here. So let's do that now. I'm going to say we're looking at level 0, which is the ground floor. And let's upload our sketch here. In reality, you would use the camera to actually take a photo of your physical sketch. But I've got one here in the gallery, which I'm going to save. So that's going to serve as a reminder when we're back at the office that the final plan is still yet to be done. The last thing you'll want to do is just to mark off the site work as complete on that pipeline, and that just tells anyone in the office or yourself when you're back at the office that the site work part of the job is complete. This can be really useful if you've got lots of jobs on the go because you know exactly where each job's up to. So that's the on-site part of the survey done, the on-site data collection. We can now head back to the dashboard and see how the report is taking shape. To preview the report, you first have to select a layout from the drop down here. I'm going to select management with targeted refurb because that's what we said in the scope. You have other layouts for different survey types. So the way you collect the data on site is the same. Use the same template, regardless of whether it's a management, demolition or refurbishment survey. But you need to select a layout at the point of previewing the report to determine how the report looks and what the title says. So I'm going to select this one and I'm going to say View Report. So the first thing you'll notice on this report preview is it's saying that the report isn't ready. This big warning message here. This will disappear once you've resolved any quality control messages on the report. Next, you can see the cover photo that we took on the site, along with the caption, which was optional, just below. Because we chose the asbestos management with targeted refurb layout, that's what the title of the report says. You can see we have some information about the job here and also some light branding on the cover page. We also offer a complimentary cover page design service. This is a service available for all of our clients, so you might end up with something a bit more flashy like the ones you see here. We have a trusted design partner who will look at your website, your branding, your logo and so on and come up with something that matches your company. Here are some cover pages we've designed for our clients. And no two are the same, as you can see. But everyone starts with this default cover page. Next, you can see there are some errors to resolve. We'll come back to them in a second, but the report itself will always keep you right. If there are any issues, you should see them here. Now, the information on the report details is pulled through from the job, including the client, the project, and so on. And you can see the map view with that marker position that I dragged over to the correct part of the building. You can also see the scope of work, who was on site, when they were on site, and the current status of the report. It's currently awaiting QC, which just means there's quality control checks to do. Next, you can see we have these summary totals, and this is going to summarize the risks into their various different risk levels. The table of contents is all automatically generated as you build up the survey. This will grow and shrink depending on the content that you have in. Everything you see here is fully customizable, so this particular layout has a hard-coded introduction, but there's no reason to say you can't have your own or different sections. For example, we also have various dynamic elements that you can insert here from one survey to the next. That was the part I glossed over earlier in that scope of work and general details section. The summary of ACMs is self-explanatory. This is all of the ACMs you found. Now the summary of non-ACMs is anything you suspected but came back as negative, so your NADISs. And the summary of locations or items of limited access is going to include, in our case, the electrics, because we didn't want to get too near the live service supply. What you'll notice as well is all of these thumbnails are clickable. If you click on them, it'll take you to the full high-res image where you can zoom in and get all that extra detail if you want to. But we keep the images nice and small for the reports to make them nice and compact when you send them to your client. So the next thing is the register. This is what most of your clients probably care about, and you'll notice that the view links will take you straight to the material assessment page with some extra information about that particular material. So you can see here we also have the material assessment information, and you would also have priority assessment information if it was included. Also, we've got the fiber type, and again we've got these clickable images if you want to see a bit of extra detail about those particular items. The last thing I want to show you is the inspected locations and items. So whereas the register just shows you the positively identified items, the inspected locations and items will show you everything you've looked at. So this is going to include any negative items and also any room notes. As you can see here, we took a room note in the hallway, and you can also click through and view any extra information about that. So let's go back and resolve some of those errors. So the first one is saying we have an attachment sketch for the ground floor, but we're awaiting the final image. Let's head back to the dashboard. I'm going to scroll down to the attachment section. To upload the final image for the floor plan, simply select the relevant item, choose File, and select the final image from your computer, as I've done here. I'm going to say this is A4 landscape and click Save. So there's that final image added. You can see on the report that error message has disappeared, and if I was to scroll ahead, you'll see that my floor plan's now been embedded, and it looks like it's part of this report, which is great. The next error is saying that we took a sample, 001, but we haven't got the final image. In this case, we default to Chrysidolite to give it that high material score in case you were to accidentally issue this to a client. It's basically the worst case scenario. Once we put these lab results in, these two medium risk items should be rescored to a low. So to add sample results, head over to the sample results section, add an item, and key in the results. At this point, you're just reading off the bulk certificate you've got back from the lab. I'm going to click Save, head back over to the report. That error message has now disappeared. And as expected, those two medium risk items have been rescored to a low, which is great. And that's reflected throughout the report. You can see here and also here. These scores have also changed. The last error is saying we have to have a sign-off. So to add the sign-off, you want to head to the sign-off section, add a new item. I'm going to use a quick fill because I've got one that I've created earlier, but you could use a stylus on your mobile device, or you could upload an image from your computer for the signature. It's up to you. Now I'm going to click Save, head back to the report, and that last error message has disappeared. The big warning message is gone, and this report is really ready to go. You can issue this to your client at this point. The last thing you might want to do is just have a little scan through, make sure you're happy with the report, and once you are, the final thing to do is to download the PDF. So let's go ahead and do that now. So this is the final finished PDF, the survey report you're going to send to your client. And we do make a few changes here. I will just quickly run through them. The first one you'll notice is that we've got the page breaks now. We've also got the headers here as well. We didn't have these before. Next, we've got the footers. This is going to include the page number. So if your client has printed this off, they'll easily be able to riffle through and find the right page. Everywhere where there was a view link before is changed to a page number. again making it very easy for clients to find the page they need. What's interesting though is you can actually still click on these page numbers and it will take you straight to that relevant section. So you can zoom around on the report by pressing these little page numbers as you go. Lastly, I'd just like to show you on the images, these are actually still clickable. Even on this PDF document, you can click on this image and it will now take you to a web page where you can zoom in and get that extra information. So whereas the PDF is kept nice and small, your clients always have the option to view the full high-res image if they want to. So here we are back on the dashboard, and I'm going to run through some of the back office features now. Before I do that, I'm going to mark off some of these pipeline stages as done. So we've done the lab results, we've done the floor plans, we've done the QC, and if we'd completed the job, we would also mark this as complete. I'm not going to do that quite yet because I want to show you something on the admin side of the dashboard. So let's head back to the jobs list, and we didn't talk too much about this at the start of the demo, but this is basically all of the jobs you've currently got on the go. By that I mean that one or more stages are incomplete. So with this top job, you can see the last stage is incomplete. With this one here, the QC and issued aren't complete. You get the idea. Once the jobs are fully complete, they go into the completed jobs, so they're out of sight, out of mind, and they're not cluttering up your initial view of the jobs list. You can drill into the jobs list in lots of different ways. So for example, let's imagine I want to find all of my asbestos surveys. I would simply select them from the list here. If I want to find all of my incomplete asbestos surveys, I can change the status here. I can go one step further than this and say, show me all asbestos surveys awaiting site work. In other words, the first stage isn't complete. If I said awaiting lab results, the first stage is complete and the subsequent ones aren't. If I say awaiting issued, you should see the job we've been working on today if I flip this site work date. Because we didn't mark off this last stage as complete, this is showing on the top of our list here. You can also do things like searching by tag. The way I like to describe tags is they make the search more powerful. The more you do with tags, the easier it is to find the jobs you're interested in. So for example, I could say, show me all of the urgent jobs, and now the jobs have to have that tag. If I was to say, show me all the urgent commercial jobs, now they need to have both. So you can see here, all of these jobs meet that criteria. Another really powerful part of the dashboard is the search. So let's say I want to find jobs for my client, Northumbria University. Here are the jobs that it's found. So we have these 7 jobs. You'll notice as well that there's a typo here. I've said Northumbria University instead of Northumbria, but it's still managed to pick up these jobs based on the client name. You can chain search queries on too. I could say show me all the jobs for Paul King, and now it's looking at both the client and also the assigned to field. The last thing I want to show you is our copy feature, and this is going to be really useful if you're doing re-inspections of the same building. So let's find the job that we're interested in, which we're going to be doing a re-inspection for. I'm going to look for that one we've been working on today. So Joe 1, this is the one we've done earlier in the demo. Let's imagine we've gone back to this property in a year's time to do the re-inspection. We wouldn't want to have to re-enter that information from scratch. So what we can do is we can make a copy of the original report by simply going into this report, pressing copy. Now this report's part of my clipboard and this is going to follow me around. In reality, you would have created a new job for the re-inspection. I'm just going to select a random job here, and now I'm going to open up the clipboard and say copy here. Now I'm prompted for the fields I want to copy over. I'm going to say it's everything. And by the way, we don't copy images by default because we expect you'd want to take some new ones, but you have the option to include them as well if you want to, perhaps as a little sanity check when you're on site. So these are the fields that are currently being copied over. Things I may not want to copy over are things like the asbestos status, do I suspect asbestos or not? Also things like the recommendation, because they may have changed. Also things like the access status and access notes, because they might have changed. Whatever changes you need to make before you go to site, you can make them here by simply cherry picking the things you want. And when you're finished, press confirm. Now what this has done is it's left the original report completely untouched. We don't want to mess with that, but it's created a brand new report which has plucked that information from the original. So where there was data, you can see there's now a red highlight, and that's just telling us there's something to do here, making sure you actually check these things over. So if I go into the scope, well, this has probably changed, right? It's going to be a reinspection survey this time. I'm going to click save for that. As soon as I saved that record, the highlighting was removed. Again, for the cover page photo, if you remember, we didn't copy the image, but we did copy the caption, so maybe that's okay. I'm going to click save, and again, that highlight has been removed. For the inspection, it has highlighted every single item in red here, as you can see, again, just as a prompt. Now, we only asked it to copy over things like the building, level, location, the inspect type, location notes, item, and material. What we didn't copy is any of this stuff, so the access notes, whether you suspected asbestos and so on. Now the way you copy items might be different, this is just an example, but you can see if I go into each one of these items and click save, that individual highlighting will be removed. So you can just massage this data, as it were, before you go to site by making any changes you need to. Once you've done all of that, and you've checked them all over, you shouldn't see any highlighting here or on the section. So we know we're ready to go, we can rock up on the site, and 90% of that locational information is already done for us. We don't need to worry about that now. We're going to save ourselves a ton of work on the site. Finally, when it's time to preview the report, you just need to select the relevant layout. In this case, it's going to be a reinspection survey as opposed to a management survey, which is what we had last time. If I click view report, the title of the report should then reflect that. So you can see here now it says Asbestos Reinspection Survey as opposed to before when it said Management with Targeted Refurb. But you can see here you saved yourself a lot of work because all of the information about the items, or certainly the location information, has been copied over. We didn't have to re-enter that from scratch. So if you've got a report with dozens or hundreds of items, this is going to be a real time saver. So that brings us to the very end of this demo. This is the same content that I would deliver online during one of our online demos, and I hope you've got great value from this. I hope you know how the system works at this point. If you're interested in using our software and this is the first time you're seeing it, please get in touch. We'd be happy to set you up with a test account or run through any questions that you have. If you're a user of Flow Mobile Surveying, I hope this helped you understand from start to finish how everything works. And if you do have any questions, we've got a great support team. Feel free to get in touch. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.